I second.
Thank you. And if everybody's in agreement, how about a thumbs up? Thank you all so much. And thank you for being here tonight. So I'm going to make a concerted effort to follow the agenda that Heidi so graciously hands me. So the first order of business, again, just a reminder of norms. We haven't gone over them in a while. We agreed to start and end on time. We can recognize other team members to speak when appropriate. We can call caucuses as needed. We will be courteous and respectful of each other, focusing on student achievement, being attentive to the topic, practicing active listening, and approaching each topic under consideration with an open mind. We will respond to proposals within 2 meet and confer meetings. We know initially we'd indicated that the last meeting for proposals was December 15th, but I think a couple of meetings back we agreed that we were going to add some time in there so that we had a little extra time. So those are our norms. We're going to start out this evening with Section D, new proposals, and the district board presentation of meet and confer proposals. And I want to give a shout out to the principals who came up with some proposals that they shared with us and that we would like to share with you. So Heidi, does everybody have a copy of the new proposals? No. So the first one, and you can give all the principal if you want, the first one we're going to talk about is early dismissal. This is really simple, I think, for everybody. We no longer have early dismissal on the last day of school or on Thursdays when we move into the upcoming school year. And so we wanted to remove that language because it just doesn't make sense anymore. And so taking out 5.4F, early dismissal, out of the handbook. And that's what Heidi's giving you a copy of right now. So I'll give you all a chance to take a look at that. But again, I think it's fairly simple and straightforward as we don't have that as we move into the next school year. And Heidi, feel free to give them all of the principal proposals. Really all of them, we can just go through them. Does anybody have any questions or comments about that proposal regarding early dismissal? Thank you. So the next piece we're going to go over is titled Non-Scholar Fridays. Okay. It is proposed that on Fridays, professional development, either by the district or site, and for team planning time will be from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. Lunch would be from 12 to 12:40. Prep would be from 12:40 to 1:40 in order to help meet the 180 minutes for all teachers per week. And the remainder of the day would be for teacher work time. I think we forgot to take out questions that people were asking, sorry. This allows for a set plan for every Friday. Teachers can use this uninterrupted work time as they choose. We would like to give them this time to offset the additional 30 minutes per scholar day that we're recommending. In order to take a non-scholar Friday off, a teacher needs prior approval from their site administrator and the superintendent or human resources. Taking a Friday off requires a full day absence. So we do encourage doctor appointments in the afternoons, not in the morning. Administration will also review the holiday calendar to ensure that if there is a Friday adjacent to the holiday, that Friday may be a full teacher workday. Okay, so that's the proposal for non-scholar Fridays. Oh no. Michala, did you want to?
Was past tense. Hello, everyone. Always, I don't know. I just struggled with this microphone. I was going to ask, I know that in yesterday's CAT meeting, there was a discussion that this would be coming forward, and there was exchange of information, and hopefully the idea of us working with, and not even countering, but like working with on this one today. So can we, if it's okay with everyone, listen to the other ones and then caucus and see if we can go back and forth on this one today?
I think that would be fine. Does
Okay.
anybody have a problem with doing that? Yeah, let's just go through all the proposals today. They're all principal, except we made a change back on longevity. So we'll go through all of those, and then if we need to caucus, then we can do that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the next one we're going to look at is a change contract day to professional day. It is proposed for certified staff that instead of a contract day, which has a beginning time and ending, that it is switched to a professional day. This honors and respects the time of certified staff, and it treats them as the professionals that they are. It also honors our parents and stakeholders in meeting the needs of building positive relationships with our parent partners. This also complies with the Title I requirements of creating opportunities for parents to engage in school functions at a time that meets their needs. Surrounding districts have incorporated this practice. And so the proposal, if you'll note, the current language is struck out below. The proposal for 5.1 professional day. A professional day means that staff will be on campus for their professional responsibilities. This includes, but not limited to, events such as Meet the Teacher, Meet the Teacher Night, Curriculum Night, parent-teacher conferences, IEP meetings, and community building events as determined by site administration. These serve as examples and are not an exhaustive list. So again, that one is change contract day to professional day. Shall I go ahead and move forward, or do you want to, Michelle, if you want to say something, go ahead.
I have questions as usual, but I might not.
Do you want to hold on? Okay. And it's okay if anybody needs to before we continue, so just let me know. The next one is teacher prep time and professional development. Okay. The rationale for this is we want to ensure that all classroom teachers receive equitable preparation and planning time. We also want to ensure our scholars receive exceptional special area classes. This is equitable to all classroom teachers. This will allow additional instructional time for teachers to spend with their scholars on academic activities such as intervention, SEL activities, and EL support. This allows for a set plan for every Friday. Teachers can use this uninterrupted work time as they choose. We would like to give them this time to offset the additional 30 minutes per scholar day in order to take a non-scholar Friday off. A teacher needs prior approval from their site administrator and superintendent. Taking a Friday off does require full day absence, as we mentioned before, and we encourage doctor's appointments in the afternoon. So if you look at the proposal, because the school day has moved from 5 days to 4, it is proposed that all teachers preschool through 8th grade receive the same amount of prep time as described below. 120 minutes of prep time during the week, adds up for your school days. 3 days of 40 uninterrupted minutes a week, Monday through Thursday. This time is intended to be uninterrupted time for the teacher without required meetings. However, if the team agrees to meet in a PLC, it is allowable. It is also allowable to meet for meetings with administration if both parties are agreeable. Administration may require 1 required staff meeting per week for business professional development, Monday through Thursday, after school or before school. Additional preparation time will be addressed in the Friday professional day proposal below that addresses the 180 previously negotiated prep time minutes so that this continues to be honored. Okay? It is proposed that on Fridays, professional development, either by the district or site, and for team planning time, again, will be from 8 to 12, lunch from 12 to 12:40, prep from 12:40 to 1:40, and then the remainder of the day would be for teacher work time. Okay, and so again, you'll notice some overlap with what we already talked about, but just so you have that information. Okay, so the final piece that you have from us is the proposed change to longevity. I think everybody probably saw Dr. Lawler and you're getting it now. Okay. I think everybody saw Dr. Lawler and Mr. Lopez's video yesterday about longevity. And so we've determined that the proposal we brought to you before, we're withdrawing that. And we want to go back to basically what was agreed upon last spring, I believe, And we know it didn't get approved. There was some confusion about that, but we finally ultimately decided it didn't get approved. But we did need to make a couple of slight changes because of changes in ASRS for the Arizona Public Employee Retirement System, okay? So, if you'll note, it's typical the way we've done this. You'll see things that have been struck through and other things that are underlined that are new. So, only employees hired on or before June 30th, 2005 are eligible for longevity. Longevity is a one-time payment. This is not part of the individual's base pay, and there is no requirement to terminate service with the district. Eligible employees will receive a payment of 29% of their base salary. To qualify for the longevity payment, staff members must have 25 years or more with the Cartwright School District and must not have taken part in the district's previous retirement program. This means you will have worked for the Cartwright School District for 25 consecutive years with no breaks in service. Upon qualification into the district longevity program, the employee will get 2 equal payments. And that's the end of that one. I'll tell you why the strike through. On it says the second payment will not be considered wages. Apparently it has to be considered wages. And so that's why that is being updated, because of changes with ASRS. And then the first payment will be received in May of the 25th year after the end of the contract year, which would be 14.5% of the 25th year pay. And then the second payment of 14.5% based on the 25th year pay for a total of 29% will be paid in December of that same calendar year. So the first payment would be in May, and then that same December you would get the second payment. Rationale, the only changes being made are to conform to rules enacted by AZSRS, and it's from Arizona Administrative Code R2-8-121. So that's the longevity. That's kind of, we kind of started there, and then we changed it, and then we're coming back to this. But I want you to know we also included the letter that will go to staff, and it basically says the exact same thing. We just wanted to include it so you could see how the letter was changing too. And that concludes our proposals. Michela?
Sorry, yes, I do have just a couple of questions. When longevity was up for change the first time, it was because if a person received their longevity and then they retired, that we were getting penalized by ASRS, correct? So then the idea was to, if you did the one payment and then the second part of the payment came after they ended their contract, that wouldn't count towards the penalty. So if the first payment is made and the second payment comes December, are we still sticking to that? Is that?
And Gary, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is we would be okay because we're in different fiscal years. If the payout is in May, okay, the new fiscal year begins July 1. So December is a different fiscal year, even though as educators it's the same year to us, right? So Gary, am I correct?
Yes, you're correct.
Thank you. Nope, no problem.
It also would come out of 2 separate budgets, the payment.
Okay.
Good point.
Fiscal year, no penalty.
Huh? It's on.
It was Michela.
For once.
Only once. New fiscal year, 2 different budgets, no penalty.
Correct.
Okay.
Because the problem is if you combine that whole amount and you pay that within that one fiscal year, that's going to exceed a large portion of your salary. So it's going to be like don't quote me, it's like a 20 or 40% increase in your salary all at once, which is what's problematic with state retirement. So that's why it's broken down into 2 payments, plus it comes in 2 fiscal years, which comes out of 2 separate budgets, so it's easier for the district to manage. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Just curious, what budget? Microphone.
Just curious, what 2 budgets will it come out of?
Well, it depends on the budget availability at that time. So right now, payments that we'll be utilizing will come out of ESSER, but maybe at that point in time, ESSER won't be around, so it'll have to come out of the district's M&O budget. It again depends on what's available at that time.
Amy Jo, did you want to give your commercial too?
All right, everybody out there at YouTube, thank you so much for tuning in to our lovely Meet and Confer meeting. Make sure you hit that like button, smash subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. You want to know what's going on here in the Cartwright School District. Never a dull moment, exciting times.
Thank you. I was a little surprised, so I wanted to give you that opportunity. Okay. So that concludes our proposals. Would you like to caucus at this time? And if so, do you want to give a recommended amount of time? Mr. Cazares?
Yeah, we'd like to caucus for about 20 minutes, if possible.
And if we need to extend, we can, but it's currently 4:20. So if we caucus for 20 minutes, we would be back at 4:40. Is that acceptable, Mr. Cazares?
That works for me.
Okay, and we're going to do a thumbs up if we're all good to caucus.
Just for
until 4:40.
clarification, which ones are we responding to today? Do you have a plan of which ones you want to sort out in the meeting?
As far as our proposals?
Correct.
I really don't. I will tell you, you guys, my feeling is I just welcome the feedback and the input. Okay, we are going to caucus.
Michelle, if you look at the letter that we drafted for you, remember that reference I was just making about an increase in pay? It states right here that the ARS rule not allowing an increase of more than 30% during the last 5 years of employment. So that's where that reference I was referring to.
That was making sure, because that was the first go around that we were trying to work
Correct.
with or against that 30%.
To comply with.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
And I'm going to recommend that we come back at 4:45, just to be safe, okay? So 4:45, we'll all reconvene in the governing board room. So we are in caucus. Thank you. Welcome back. We have returned from caucus. It is 4:57. Thank you all for your patience. Before we move on to board responses to counter proposals, did anyone from the CEA team have any questions or comments?
Yes, we're hoping to go back and forth on the non-scholar Fridays
Yes.
Proposal. And I think I'm just going to give a bunch of notes because we were given the opportunity as the CAT team. Again, those are the site leaders from each site, meet together with Dr. Lawler and team, along with our meet and confer folks to talk about what Fridays will look like as Fridays continue. And so we just use this time to compare those notes, put our notes in there, and then also look back at our previous negotiations on the Friday schedule. So we are in the understanding that the 30 minutes of increased seat time or instructional time would add the additional time with the students to 2 hours a week. So the idea of that 2 hours rolling over into a Friday, and at 1:15 your day is released. It's not additional prep time. It is your release of contract or your professional day. Your time is done because that time was given through Monday and Thursday is one of the. Is it easier if I go through the list and we can do, okay.
And Michelle, if I could ask you too, because you said you took notes, if you could share those notes with us too, like
Absolutely.
after the meeting, thank you.
Absolutely. I also have to retype them, so give me a second. In addition, the day that is the proposed day for Fridays with the 8 to 12 PD, 12 to 12:40 lunch, 12:40 to 1:40 prep, that time could be called prep, but right now on Fridays, the negotiated prep minutes and the teacher work days, those don't come from our Monday through Thursday prep days. Those are CEA negotiated days. Originally was negotiated for 10 days of uninterrupted teacher time, and last year negotiated to take those days, 6 of them to remain uninterrupted teacher work days, the other 4 the time to be split. So that's why we have district PDs, prep time. We have school planning, prep time. So we have all the color of the days, which I know people are super excited about the different colors. However, those prep minutes aren't the same as the prep minutes for Monday through Thursday. So part of our notes is to continue with our Monday through Thursday. Our 180 minutes need to be met on those 4 days, and then work to balance the schedule a little bit better for our Fridays. We obviously would like to keep are working to keep our teacher work days, our PDs or our regionals. We went back and forth in there about calling them different things. So the district PD days or the district regionals, where we have choice to keep those as well. Our site-based planning and also quarterly planning, our members have definitely spoken about keeping those, but also in a balance. So for instance, we would like the PDs and the offering of PDs, but we would like them to be maybe a little bit more appropriately differentiated, allowing for either tiered PDs, allowing PDs to be a little bit more specific. School planning, we understand principals want more time with their staff, and our staff actually needs it too for climate and staff bonding, and so a little bit better balance between those days. So if we step back a little bit from PDs, if we step forward a little bit with school planning, but to keep that on Fridays, to have SPED PDs or to SPED days or SPED folks for their Fridays to actually be for IEPs, paperwork, or PDs that are SPED specific. We would also like to try and add in there ESPs to work 410 so we can maximize student contact time and also draw in ESPs to our district with our 410s, and also with the understanding that there are ESPs that will need to not work 410s but participate in Fridays and also be given the opportunity to attend PDs as well, especially when they have their time with students. In addition, there was a bunch of ideas, especially shared at CAT meeting about PD opportunities or ways for perhaps our mentoring team to work with teachers, veteran teachers, to work with new teachers to definitely build our Cartwright family. I think I've hit all of them. My people can let me know. But the biggest one is that addition of the 30 minutes per day. And I think the second biggest one on there was that use of the prep minutes. I talk very fast. It's an island in me, so I can repeat.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing that feedback. If you could just provide us with the notes,
Absolutely.
that would be helpful. Did anybody on the board or the CEA team have questions or responses to that? My one concern that immediately popped into my head on the Fridays for IEPs is there is always that possibility that a parent can't attend on a Friday, and I think we need to be cognizant of that, and I think that takes us back to that professional day piece as well.
Hey, Michela, just clarify for me. So on that Friday, instead of it being the 180 minutes for prep time, it was just be done at 140, and the teachers would then be released for the day on Friday, correct? I missed it. I apologize. I wrote down that the CEA at no prep on Friday, just the 140.
So I was just pointing out, so on the proposal, it's the district's proposal says 1240 to 140 is prep, but then when you look at how that time is dispersed during the week, that lessens prep time during the week. And so I just wanted to make everyone aware that currently the prep time that we have on Fridays is not part of our prep time during the week. That is prep time that was negotiated from teacher work days, except this year, instead of having full days, it was split between different days. Teachers really reached out, and they're desperate for that prep time to prepare. So if it's that schedule, I know that teachers would like to continue having their preps built in on Fridays as well, because we need prep time. But that was in response to the prep time looking different on the proposal on Fridays, Monday through Thursday. So I know it does kind of tie into the other proposal, but I feel like that this one is first, and then the other one, how it works out. How the Friday time is dispersed, I feel is the other proposal. This one is like, what are we going to do about that extra 30 minutes? And then how do our Fridays look from there?
All right, I think I got you. Thank you.
Susan, in response about the special education, it's not necessarily that all the IEPs would be on that day. It's that they want to give them time to work on it because their instructional day with students is going to be extended, and then we're going to run into time with with the members not having time to do their paperwork. So it's progress reports, working on IEPs, progress monitoring, things like that, in addition to the possibility of having some IEP meetings on Friday, because with the 30 minutes extended, having IEPs after or before school is becoming much more difficult, and finding someone to cover.
Another thing I think it's worth noting as well is that if our teachers are working from home on Fridays, they also don't have travel time impacting them to and from work. And that varies, of course, by people, but we also look at when we provide travel time for our teachers within a school day, there are guidelines regarding that as well. And so I do think it's worth pointing out that there's a time savings on Fridays because of a lack of travel time to and from your school site. Other questions or comments? Okay. Did any other that we wanted to talk about right now?
I had a question about the early dismissal. Just saying that we no longer have early dismissal on the last day of school or on Thursdays. Does this absolutely close the door to the possibility of in the future opening up? I know that a lot of teachers had a lot of difficulty getting their parent-teacher conferences done with just that Friday morning. And spreading them out amongst school just for parent availability and just sheer number of students. Does this, if we accept this, absolutely close the door for negotiating on parent-teacher conference week, an early release on Thursday to facilitate those parents and those teachers?
I don't think anything I don't think we're absolutely closing the door on anything. I think that that's a good question that you could send us that we could also share back. And I think it's something that it's just good to have that feedback.
Thank you.
And if anybody has a question or comment, you might want to just raise your hand, and then we'll know that we can recognize you, and we'll yell at you to turn on your microphone if you don't. Okay. Okay, so if everyone's in agreement, we can move on to the counter proposals. Okay. Okay, Heidi, do they have the copies of those? Thank you so much. Let's go ahead and start with the CEO proposed changes to the RIF rubric. I'll be honest with you, there were some questions here and we didn't know that we had all the information. I don't know that anyone is opposed to making changes to the RIF rubric. It's just that it seemed like there were other matters that seemed to be more involved in taking precedence right now. And so we'd like a little more information about the proposal because of the fact that we're moving to a staffing standard based model. We just want to make sure what it is we're trying to accomplish. And the one thing that we talked about is the good news is there's been no discussion of a RIF. Nobody's discussing doing a RIF right now. So it would be nice to have some more time for this topic. And it might also be a good discussion for a committee to perhaps make to executive leadership and say these are some recommendations. And I know that part of this was asking that we change teachers to certified professional staff members. Again, because it's a student-centered staffing model, I don't know if we could do that, but it doesn't mean that I'm completely accurate in that. We might be able to do that, but we would just need a little more information. I also noted that you were taking information from the evaluation system, which I think is thoroughly appropriate, and I know that we do that. And also with certificates and endorsements, we know when longevity was taken away, everybody had to sort of change up their RIF rubrics, and Cartwright was no exception to that. And also just changing some of the educational levels as well. So again, I don't think this is something that the board team is opposed to. We just thought we needed a little more information and perhaps even a little more discussion. And if it's not something that's on the table for this year as far as a RIF is concerned, at least we feel like we have some time on that one. So questions or comments? Amy Jo?
So when you say putting a committee together, what would be the timeline for that? Are you thinking like in the spring or?
And you know, it's kind of up to you guys because you made the proposal. And as I said, I don't think it's anything where people look at this and say, oh, this is totally unreasonable. I just think as we moved into a different staffing model and the other changes that are going on, honestly, it probably wasn't as much in the forefront as some of the other items we've been looking at. And so I just think it's something that could take another look. I don't believe we have to establish a committee for everything we do, but if a group of individuals wants to put together sort of some information and a rationale for it, that might be helpful.
And I would suspect, Amy Jo, like psychologists, related service providers, those would be the people at the table. And if there is a committee that wants to get together or some interested parties, I'd be more than happy to have that conversation with you all.
All right, sounds good.
And I'll tell you one of my main questions, Amy Jo, just for me, I don't want to speak for everybody, but one of the first questions I had is we staff differently for teachers than we do for related service providers or psychologists or people like that. And that's what concerns me about putting them all together. Okay.
We were just trying to be succinct and tack on to a process that was already there, but it's just something that there's not a lot of auxiliary staff specific things in the handbook, and now we're seeing an opportunity to put some transparency in the thought process that would go into, if that ever happened, just to have it in place. So this was an opportunity to move towards that.
And Amy, Amy Jo, I applaud that because I sit here and wonder too. Let's just look at psychologists. If there was going to be a RIF of psychologists, there isn't currently a plan in place. Obviously, we need to be systematic and transparent before that, and what our plan is to make sure we're being fair to everybody. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, and thank you both for your willingness to also look into things moving forward. I appreciate that.
I just have a few quick questions, even with, as we continue to look at it. One, currently the RIF rubric doesn't reflect as our salary schedule the educational credits, and so that was one of the changes that we put in there so that they were consistent. Thank you. And then the other is also in our handbook, although there are no talks of RIFs, every year it does come up with the need for involuntary transfers, and in our handbook, the RIF rubric is used for involuntary transfers. The first asking who would like to, and then if there are no volunteers, then to go from there. And so that was also the reason why we just wanted to make sure that was updated. So just throwing that out there for if we are going to continue these conversations on this is, I suspect just every year we always have a need for involuntary transfers, and that usually comes up rather quickly. So for continued conversations.
No, I appreciate that clarification, and I think, yes, I think also this could be a year where you do see people having to be involuntarily transferred. I get that, so thank you. Okay. Other questions or comments about the RIF rubric? Okay, I'm going to move on to the CEA proposed psychologist addition to 301 funds. We are aware previously it was not allowable for certain employee groups, but we know that that has changed. And so one of the things we wanted to share in our counter proposal or our response, we do believe that school psychologists are integral members of our schools and school district and have the potential to impact student achievement and well-being as much as any other staff member. Therefore, this is not something that the board team is opposed to. However, in discussion, we felt that this should go before the 301 committee rather than before meet and confer. It's also important for everybody to understand this, and I have no opinion, the board team has no opinion either way, but we just need people to understand the more people we include in this, of course, the smaller the payout is going to be for individuals, which isn't a bad thing. I just want people to know that. The other piece I wanted to share that we didn't really mention in the rationale, but just wanted to share, we feel, and perhaps you do as well, that eventually 301 is going to have to go back to the voters. And we know that when the voters have been responsible for 301, the group that they want to see benefit from 301 are teachers. We also know lay people don't always understand. If you all remember, not too long ago when people were saying, "Oh no, we only want this to go to core teachers. You know, we don't want things to go to special area teachers." Or there are things that maybe people who aren't in the world of education don't always understand, and we get that. But we do think it's important to point out that we do think eventually 301 will go back to the voters. However, we just wanted to encourage you to take this to the 301 committee for their review, and if they're in favor of doing that, then I think that that's something that we would move forward on. Okay. Any questions or comments about that? Yes, ma'am.
As always, I appreciate that we thought that it would go through because it is monetary. But also, well, I recognize that we are not directly in classrooms with teachers. Psychologists also see that administrators are paid the equivalent of 301 monies out of M&O. People at district office, previously are paid the equivalent monies out of 301, or the 301 equivalent monies out of M&O. So it just seemed like a good ask. And if that's going to hurt teachers, we might just change the ask to asking for equivalent 301 money out of M&O in the future.
Well, and something that is worth tagging on here, I was going to save this to the end, one of my things for the end, but I'll go ahead and say it now. One of the things we are asking that CEA be involved in is a committee to look at different stipends that we offer across the district in a variety of areas. And I know there are several people that receive the 301 equivalency, and I think it's a bit of a misnomer I think they use that more as a performance stipend, is my understanding, than as far as, the same way a teacher gets it. However, that being said, I do believe that, as you said, and as we agree, psychologists impact student learning, principals impact student learning, other people do impact student learning too. And so, again, we are not opposed to psychologists being involved in that. But I do think it is also worth noting that psychologists, typically have a different salary schedule than teachers. They are paid at a different hourly rate than teachers when there are hourly things going on. So those are things I think that you should talk about and think about with your constituents, and then move forward from there. Okay, so the next one is the CEA proposed salary schedule for school counselors and social emotional learning specialists. Along with that, a variety of stipends were connected to that as well. And so the board team is recommending that the SEL and counselor employee group remain on the certified salary schedule and be afforded the opportunity to receive the 301 monies and all stipends mentioned above, excluding only the $1,000 stipend for individuals attending a council for the accreditation of counseling and related educational programs. But otherwise, clearly, the doctoral stipend, clearly the NBC, and then I believe there was another stipend indicated for people who can supervise others. And so that was our recommendation there. Amy Jo?
I recognize that you want to keep them on the certified salary schedule. Is it possible to give them their own salary schedule with equivalent money so it kind of is easy for people looking for the job? Do you understand what I'm saying? So that it wouldn't necessarily be a change of salary, but it's easier to find and it's separate and it shows, wow, they really value this because they have their own schedule. It's not necessarily different money. It'll just include the stipends. It'll be a lot more clear and easy to understand for potential employees.
Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea. I think recognizing our school counselors and it being equivalent to the teacher schedule, I think is a great idea.
Okay.
And including the specific stipends on there, I think it'll be just a lot more clear and easy.
Yes, I would agree. And Amy Jo, maybe after this we can talk a little bit more, you and I, about the 1,000 stipend that was excluded, just so that I understand the need and the want
Sure.
for that moving forward.
Yep, that would be great.
And I think it's also important to note there would probably be language about, you probably wouldn't have anybody get every single stipend for everything. There'd probably be language about there being a cap on how many stipends you could get. But clearly, you would also want to go with the stipend that would be the most beneficial to the employee. But again, Amy Jo, if you and Dr. McNeil could, give us just a little blurb so as we go through this process, we remember to relook at that and make those changes. Thank you so much for your input and your feedback, both of you. Any other questions about salary schedule for school counselors?
Logistics.
Yes.
So, like, if the schedule includes the stipends and the counselors are not, because I'm in HR, so I need to think about that. So, and the counselors don't have the specific requirement, don't meet the specific requirement, how would you create a schedule for a general schedule? See what I'm
Sure.
saying?
So it's just the base salary, and at the bottom of the schedule, it's listed. If you have your national board, it's this. If you have this, it's this. It's the same as like the psychologists and the RSPs have their special stipends listed at the bottom, separate from the actual schedule and the lanes.
So it wouldn't be in the schedule. It
wouldn't be in the base salary part. It would be listed underneath. If you have this, you would qualify for X additional.
Okay.
And just to reiterate, I think what I heard you say is the salary schedule would still be with the certified, but it would be a separate schedule addressing that and with those possible stipends listed below so people would know that was the schedule for our counselors and SELs.
Yeah, it makes people feel more valued to have a separate schedule than to be a footnote at the bottom. Oh, by the way, you're included in this and here's some stipends.
Okay, thank you. Other discussion? Okay, if we could go on to the COLA, I'm actually going to recommend that we kind of talk about both of these together because really our response is the same. For the proposed 2% COLA, which is cost of living adjustment for both certified and ESPs. And again, as I said, I'll just kind of lump those two together because we had basically the same response. We feel that both our certified staff members and our ESPs are valued employees in our district, and we do appreciate their contribution to our scholars' performance and growth. The only reason we are opposed to the COLA is everyone's going to get a raise. Everyone's going to get a salary increase. They're going to get movement, or they're going to get that increase this year, and so we don't want to go with the 2% COLA because then that's just on top of what we're already planning for people to get an increase. So I know that when we did the forum, I heard people saying, I don't want my salary cut. Nobody's getting their salary cut. Clearly if somebody's working less hours, perhaps that could be a natural piece of it, but nobody's cutting anyone's salary. And we are definitely planning on giving all employees a raise this year. So for that reason, we are not in favor of the 2% COLA at this time. However, I also want to reiterate, if you're eligible for COLA because you've maxed out, then clearly you will get the COLA because you've maxed out on a salary schedule. Okay, and again, I want to say, because not everybody understands, I was in a meeting the other day and somebody said, I don't know what you're talking about. Cost of living adjustment is what COLA stands for. Right, Gary? Okay, cost of living adjustment. And Michelle, I think you had something to say.
I do. So when the committee met and we chatted about COLA, there are quite a few people that are maxed out on the salary schedule, and there's also a small group of people that well, not a small group, but that don't receive the COLA at all. So part of the intention is to rectify that situation. So even with the COLA increase, their yearly pay doesn't increase the next year. So where I do move along the steps because years and education for those that are maxed out, we definitely want to continue to fix that issue because just because they're maxed out and the ones that small group, that's not getting the COLA, we like to make sure that they are receiving the COLA. And then the COLA for both, to be honest, was with all the talk of budget deficit and the fact that our salary schedules do say that every 2 years that we negotiate back and forth, the movement that we are experiencing is, how do I say this, minimal compared to what that COLA increase is. So this is probably more so for the people at home. The COLA we understand there are budget things going on, but also too, there are some people that have been stagnant for 2 years and wanting to offer that ability to move. So I definitely want to make sure that even though they're at this time not wanting to move forward with the COLA, I do want to make sure that we're doing something for our folks who are not receiving the COLA. So there are some folks that are off the schedule, but there is no movement for them in addition to this one.
And could I just, before you go, Amy Jo, so I assume you mean there's a group of people across positions, whether ESP certified, that fall into this category where they're not getting any kind of increase from COLA? Okay, so that would be something that would be something that I would have to touch base with financial services about. But I appreciate you letting me know that. Mm-hmm. Okay, and Amy Jo, you were going to say something.
And it's also in recognition that there's about 6% inflation going on, and Social Security raised their cost of living 5.9%. So if you're not getting about 5.9% more, your money's just worth, and you're getting less money and your money has less buying power. So it was really just an acknowledgement that you know, we may be getting an increase, but it's not keeping up with the cost of living increase, especially with rents for our teachers and things like that. And it's hurting at the gas pump right now. So it was really just more of an acknowledgement of, we understand with the budget, we couldn't have significant salary schedule negotiations. This was, hey, we know inflation's bad right now. Here's 2%. We'll get back to the salary schedule type of thing.
And I know, I think Gary had something to say.
So, Michelle, can you get me a list of who those individuals are? Like if there's
Is
a
your
class.
mic on, Gary? I can't tell. Oh, it is. Okay.
It's on.
Could just be me.
Can you give me a list of who those people are so we can kind of look that up?
I can, if you're okay with Mary Lou, sorry, but dragging her into this as well to get you the list of folks that are, yes, I can.
Okay.
Sorry, Mary Lou.
And something else I just wanted to add, and I don't remember the year, but something that really resonated with me. If you guys heard at the last board meeting, if you heard our CFO, Victoria Farrar, talking about, you know, how we're funded, it's basically the same funding from when I think she was in elementary school. When our CFO was in elementary school, we were paying the same for our kids here in Arizona as we're paying now. And I think we can all agree that that is disgraceful. And so, you know, I understand the points you're bringing up about cost of living, and I unfortunately feel like it just kind of starts with how they fund us, too, which is so unfortunate. So I just want to say that. Other comments regarding COLA, and thank you, Michela, for getting that information to Gary, by the way. Okay. Okay, so the next one is the SLPA salary schedule. And so you had shared information about the fact that they are on the ESP salary schedule, and it would be nice for them to have their own salary schedule. And so we can absolutely do that as well and put them perhaps in the same area as the related service provider salary schedules. But it is also important to note, with going to a 4-day schedule, clearly we would want to increase their pay because they would probably go from 40 hours per week to 32. And so any kind of salary schedule, like if we're looking at the salary schedule, you probably want to look at that and take 20%, because that's what we would be looking at, going from a 5-day to a 4-day for our SLPAs. So again, we could absolutely do a separate salary schedule that you'd find in the related service provider section of our website, but this is going to be one of those positions where they're not going to be working 5 days. Amy Jo?
So just for clarity, does this move them from hourly to salary?
That is a good question, and I probably need to talk to Victoria about that.
Okay, because that was one of the points that we had put in here. So just for clarity, because
I don't know if Gary has any input there, but that might be a Victoria question.
And then what would the salary increase be?
I think that would be something that we'd have to discuss, again, based on where our budget is, where we are with the other things that we do, to make sure that, again, we're meeting, first and foremost, being fiscally responsible. But yes, absolutely, we are not opposed to a salary increase to SLPAs.
And then what's the timeline for finding out what that salary increase would be?
Well, I would like, again, and as I shared before, I don't care if it's like super formal, but if you guys want to come back to us with suggestions, we're more than open to that. And so even, you know, tonight or the next time we meet, which is probably going to be that first week in January, just so we can talk about it some more, I can talk to the people that manage our budget.
And Amy Jo, I think it's a simple math problem, right? I mean, if we look at what the requested amount was, and then divide it by 5 and take the 20% out, I think we can figure that out. Or am I overthinking it?
So I think the problem's going to be is that if we're not ultra competitive for 4-day, why wouldn't they go somewhere else and work 5 days and make more money? Like, they have a higher rate and they have more hours. Why on earth would they work in Cartwright?
Yeah,
I would like to say because we are an awesome school district.
You know what? Our kids are amazing, but kids are amazing in every district, honestly. And SLPAs are gold.
Amy Jo, how about we do the math problem, we look at the numbers and then compare them to our neighboring districts and see if they match up, and if not, then perhaps we need to have a longer conversation.
All right. You and I will work on this one. Okay.
If that's okay with Susan.
No, that's perfectly fine. And just again, it's perfectly fine for us to break off and come up with some ideas. Just make sure we share with everybody when we have those ideas, and that's why we have, that shared drive and everything. So thank you both for your willingness to do that.
And obviously for our fans out there and whatever land they're in.
YouTube land.
Obviously, this lives in my department as well as Amy Jo's, so that's why the conversation between Amy Jo and myself. Just wanted to clarify that.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. All right, and then no, I have two more, sorry. So the next one is the board team counterproposal to the proposed changes to the certified contract. And so we went through what you were requesting, and we know that this was regarding, for the most part, liquidated damages when somebody breaks a contract. And so we were all in favor of, reasonable requests for, military orders. But I do need to clarify something which I added there. If it's a military decision, we have people that are, just so people know what I'm talking about, we have people that are in the Army Reserve and things like that. And if there is a declared emergency by the governor or the president, that is out of their control. And so we don't consider that a break in their service or anything. However, sometimes people in the reserve make choices. They say, I want to go to this training that's offered by the military. If that's the case, it would be a separate matter. If they didn't have to do it, but they were choosing to do it for the military, so that's why we added that language there. If it were an emergency situation and they had to go, then of course that would not apply, and they would still be considered our employee. Okay, a major medical condition that will not allow the teacher to return to work for the remainder of the year. Of course, we would not impose liquid damages. However, we do require that medical documentation by, their primary care physician or specialist of some sort. However, we want to also add the language, the teacher will agree not to accept another teaching position in a different school for the remainder of that school year. I want to share with you, there's a reason we're saying that. We actually had an experience where we were hiring a person after the school year had begun, and we received information that they had been working in a neighboring district and had said that they had a serious health condition that wouldn't allow them to teach anymore. And so, unfortunately, I wish I could say that everyone was 100% honest, and that's not always the case. And so we did not hire that person because we felt that was unethical to hire someone who had given misinformation to their previous district. And so we are requesting that if people come to us with medical conditions, whether it's stress-related, whether it's a physical ailment, that they don't take another job in another district for the remainder of that school year. A teacher has, I'm going to skip the hostile work environment. I'll come back to that. Teachers offered a promotion within the field of education. It's not a lateral move. So obviously if a teacher gets an assistant principal position or an assistant principal gets a principal position, those kinds of things would be considered a promotion. Absolutely, we are fine with that. Again, we need documentation. Family member suffering from major medical condition, teacher must provide care. A teacher relocates with a spouse or family member. All of those are acceptable. We would just need documentation, whether from a healthcare provider, whether from a human resources department, we would need that documentation. Back to the hostile work environment. We are disinclined to accept that, and I will tell you why. If you are saying that a documented proof of a hostile work environment is filing a grievance or medical documentation or malpractice by a site administrator, I think that's very difficult to prove. I think it's very difficult to pinpoint, and I think it could also open the door to somebody who wanted out of a contract filing a grievance when perhaps there was not a need for that. And so I feel that that's a really nebulous area. This is something we discussed in great length. It's sometimes as adults we take a job and we don't like the person we're working with or for, and then we have to make decisions regarding that. Clearly, human resources, school administrators, cabinet, executive leadership has the ability to look into individual situations, but we also have to make sure we have guidelines that we're following and that we're sticking to. So for the most part, we were, for all the reasons except the hostile work environment, we are in favor of those. We also believe that a tiered system is fair when it comes to liquidated damages. And so our suggestion is if somebody, if contracts come out in February and you sign your contract for the upcoming year, and if you have to break it between February and April for the upcoming year, then the liquidated damages would only be $1,000. If you had to break it in May, it would go to $1,500. And from June through the remainder of that calendar year, the recommendation is that we stay with the $2,500. The reasons, the rationale, we do give staff 15 days to accept contracts. There are significant costs to the district when we lose people after they sign a contract. We all know there's a teacher shortage. We all know that. And that's why all districts are imposing liquidated damages. If we have to do contract staffing, that's an additional cost of 2 to 4% per contract. The recruitment job boards are about $2,000 to $5,000 a year. Out-of-state job fairs, about $1,500 an event. We also have a risk associated with unqualified teachers, and I think the biggest is the additional stress on the remaining teachers that are supporting additional students or substituting for other classes because we don't have adequate staff. There are costs to students and families when students have unqualified teachers or they get just a revolving door of substitute teachers. It's very detrimental to our scholars. Process recommendations, we recommend the staff member requests release. HR reviews the documentation and implements the tiered system. The staff member provides the requisite documentation if they're requesting waiving damages. And if staff members fail to report to work and or break their contracts before board approval, we will report those staff members to the Arizona Department of Education. All we ask is that they wait for the governing board's decision and continue reporting to work during that time. So that's our response on the language in the certified contract. Questions or comments? Hannah?
Yes, I do have a question. So in this proposal, there was also a portion about if there was a salary decrease. And I don't see anything in here about that. So we had said that if it comes to that where there is a salary decrease, teachers will have 2 weeks to make a decision if they can afford to continue to work with that pay salary. And then also teachers will be provided with an example pay stub till they have an understanding of what their new biweekly pay would look like. And then it also stated that teachers would not be held liable for liquidated damages if their salary was decreased. So I was just curious, what was your counter to that?
I think, first of all, as previously stated, there's no plans to decrease anybody's salary. There is a possibility people could have decreased hours. I would tell you, in current language, it indicates that if there is not sufficient money, these kinds of things can happen. So it's in the contract language already that can happen, but I understand you're asking specifically about the liquidated damages, excuse me. And so my response to that would be that I'm going to go back to my team and talk about it and get a consensus on that piece. But I can tell you again, there is no discussion of cutting anyone's salaries.
Okay. And yes, thank you for that. I just think it's important that, the district is trying to protect themselves, especially with the current budget issues that we're having, and a contract is a way that, we teachers can also protect themselves. And I really think, we've talked a lot about budget and how we don't have enough money, but not decreasing if someone does leave. I mean, we know all of our teachers are here for the kids, and if they leave early, it is not because they all of a sudden started hating children. It is due to something that was too big for them. And I think, there's a give and pull with the district needs teachers to give. And I think, especially with the cost of living increasing and all this stuff, $2,500 is, and I don't want anyone to quit. Obviously, we all want our students to have highly qualified teachers. But I think it's important to remember that teachers are a part of this too. And we don't want to leave, but we also need to make sure that we have protections for ourselves in case we do get into any type of something that we cannot handle. And with the hostile work environment, I think I totally understand what you're saying with it is hard to document that. But with that being said, I do think it is I guess we will counter. But yeah, that was my only thing.
And if I could respond, Hannah, one thing I would also say, if somebody is in a situation in their current position, location, where they're struggling, I have worked with, I know Mary Lou has, I know Dr. Heredia has, worked with a lot of people, and we always try to put people in a place where they can be successful and happy. And I know that we have done that on more than one occasion, and I know that we offer that to people every day. Now, that being said, sometimes it's just a personality conflict, and sometimes it's just perhaps people they work with or around. So the other thing I'd like to say, I take very seriously the way people treat the people they work with and people that report to them. And I think it's very important that we don't allow an imbalance of power to cause people to be mistreated. And so this is not something that we as a district would ignore. If somebody is being mistreated at the workplace, I can assure you that there would be a strong investigation and changes would be made. But I also want to reiterate, if somebody is not comfortable where they are, we work with that person, and we like to find people the place where they can be happy and the place where they can be productive, and we'd like that place to continue to be Cartwright. Thank you.
I just had two quick ones. Maybe for clarification, as I know this is going, as Hannah said, we'll talk through it when we meet next. But the going backwards, the making sure that the resignation gets to the governing board is. If I resign, I'm not resigning. If I resign on Monday and the governing board meeting is on Thursday, does my resignation make it onto that one, or is that held until the next month?
We really work hard to get it on as quickly as possible, but I will tell you, we are at the mercy of when the agenda flips and when it's already gone or when it's been published. Sometimes our hands are tied, but I will tell you, Heidi has been a miracle worker with getting people on even at the 11th and a half hour, because we try really hard to do that. We're also cognizant of a situation when people are struggling, whether it's a family member, whether it's themselves, and we try to be very, very supportive. We just ask that people communicate with us, and we try, I think, very hard in human resources to make sure that we are being compassionate and that we are being fair, not just to our employees, but also the children involved and the other staff involved.
Okay, thank you. And then the other one was further clarification on documentation, and this might be an overshare, but like the family members, if they're suffering from a major medical condition, I can tell you for a fact, if Hannah is my sister, a doctor will not write me the medical note that says that I am needed to help care for Hannah unless I am their POA or their medical proxy, which in this case, if most of our teachers, their family lives out of state. So if we were not in the same state, that it would be impossible to do. So I'm speaking from experience on that one, that what does that medical note looks like if we are to care for our parents or siblings or loved ones?
I've had a couple of different things, and you would be surprised. Some people will write notes for a family member. One of the things people have done too, as they've requested FMLA, and so as a result of the FMLA paperwork or documentation, we're able to do that. And finally, we actually had one staff member who and again, I want you to know we keep this very confidential, but we've had staff members provide us just with medical records, documentation of a situation, so we know what's going on. And so, again, we're not interested in violating people's privacy, but it is a contract and it's a legally binding document. And we have a responsibility, again, to the children of our district and the other staff members of our district to make sure that we are doing due diligence with people who are requesting to leave, who are requesting to waive those liquidated damages. And we have waived a lot of liquidated damages this year, I can tell you that. Okay, so the last one, the last counter proposal that we have is the conflict resolution procedure, and I didn't want this to get lost in the shuffle because I believe Mix Barrera a few meetings back asked about this, implementing this conflict resolution procedure for our staff. We do not think that is a bad idea at all. However, with the move to the student-centered staffing based on student numbers, we don't want to overwhelm anybody at this point either. So one of the things we have agreed to do, I'm not seeing this on here. I don't know if we copied the wrong one. Is the response on there? Oh, I found it. Sorry. Oh, that's the one that wouldn't copy in a different color. Okay. Yes. I'm looking for the blue. Okay. So we understand the importance of this proposal, and we agree with the need of a protocol for handling conflicts. But again, we're concerned about adding that responsibility to building administrators right now as we're implementing these new standards. And so we've asked our executive director of Safe Schools to develop a conflict resolution sort of guide for our staff to use as a first step in dealing with a conflict with a colleague. If your conflict is with your supervisor, you should always go to HR for support and guidance there. But if it's with a colleague, and you can request this guide and use this guide to follow some steps to resolve the situation. However, if you're unable to resolve it that way, again, I would encourage you to reach out to your supervisor or HR, because you might have to go to the next step of filing that grievance. But if you're able to work it out with the guidelines that our executive director of Safe Schools is going to develop, then that would be a great thing. Andrea?
Hello? Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you for that, and I appreciate that the Executive Director of Safe Schools will develop a conflict resolution guideline for us to use. I do want to state that it is concerning, and I do understand that we don't want to put this added pressure on our administrators to have to mediate conflicts, but we do want to move toward that because there's so many hidden costs to having staff-to-staff conflicts in a workplace that can cost our school culture and climate to decrease, right? And so there are all these other costs in terms of, inefficiencies with operating, people not wanting to come to work, calling out more often, et cetera, et cetera. So this is one of those ways to kind of alleviate some of those pressures that our schools might be facing due to conflicts between employees.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments. And again, I don't want to say that this is something that we never want to consider. It's just something that, based on the timing right now, we'd like to offer this kind of interim support mechanism, if you will. Any other questions or comments? Ms. Adams?
So my question is, I know there's so much going on with this upcoming year. So maybe what if we changed it from like administrator to a different position? It might not be technically like the assistant principal or principal. At my school, we do something kind of similar to this, and it has been very successful, and it has really helped our culture, or just our staff culture, and it is not our principal that leads it. So maybe we could consider, administrators might have a lot going on, but maybe there is a different position that's out of the classroom that could be able to facilitate it. But I do know that there's a lot happening, but yeah.
And Hannah, thank you for that. And we would welcome any recommendations, to add to that. So feel free to share that. Okay, so it is now 5:52. How time flies. So the next part of our agenda are pending proposals or new proposals from the CEA team. Mr. Cazares?
This moment, we have no responses to any of the pending proposals. I would like to circle back to a proposal from last Confer meeting that was in regards to the district's response to the COVID extension sick leave benefits.
Yes.
I know you guys were not looking to unable to agree with this one due to us using ESSER funds for other things. Is there any way we can open this back up for discussion? I'd like to know, what other projects we're going to use the ESSER funds for that we can't use for this.
I can tell you that the ESSER funds for this year have already been earmarked for projects. I know that some of those projects include building, and some of those projects just include, I think, remodeling of things. Gary, did you want to speak to that, or do you have information you could share? And if you don't, that's fine. Okay. Okay, so what I will tell you is when I did share this with our CFO, I was told the money for this year had been earmarked already and that we weren't able to look at doing something different with that at this time. So that's what I was told. So I am doubtful that proposal will get new life.
Okay, so we earmarked all of the $69 million that I was told was available back in the September board meeting.
Well, my understanding is because of where we are with the budget shortfalls, one of the things that had to happen is that money had to be held in reserve to make sure that we could meet our responsibilities, pay our bills, anything outstanding. Again, I'm sorry, I'm not a finance person, but I do understand that is the case. I don't know if anybody had the opportunity to watch at the last board meeting when information was shared regarding our current reality and sort of how we ended up in it and what we're trying to do to make sure that we are being fiscally responsible so we don't have to negatively impact our students and our employees any more than possible.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to pass it on to Amy. She has some information she'd like.
Hello. Okay. Just quickly, before Amy begins, as we continue planning, we did send some questions over, and I know it's been quite a week, 2 weeks. If we can possibly get responses to the additional questions, hopefully by Fridays, or before Friday, because we are meeting as a group to continue working on the proposals. And I think that was my quick request.
Michela, and who were the questions directed to? Just so I'm sure.
I think it was the whole team, but I believe a lot of them were finance based. So.
And those were via email, were they not?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Michela, did you send that, or did Alex send that?
Alex said?
Okay. Thank you. I just want to make sure that I'm remembering correctly.
It would be from Saturday.
Gotcha.
All right. So in my mind, Victoria was going to be here. So we'll obviously have to wait to get feedback on this. But I have I watched her presentation on the board and had some additional questions, so I went to budget boot camp, and you guys get a snack, get a drink, get a Snuggie, and buckle in. So I have questions about the 18 million deficit, and obviously we can wait and get questions from Victoria if Gary can't answer. So it's been stated that the $18 million deficit is specific to Cartwright is due to budgeting at higher student levels than are actually enrolled. But if you look at the summary of the school district proposed expenditure budget, this year was budgeted off of an ADM of 14,862. According to the CSD ADM summary from ADE, the ADM is actually 13,610. But the projected 100-day ADM is 13,759. So based on the district's budgeted ADM of 14,862 and ADE using 13,759, there's a deficit of 2.3 million, which is down from the 3.0 million, which was indicated by the ADE letter to the governing board dated 2/28/21. So the deficit's already less due to the increased enrollment trend, so that's good. However, this doesn't account for a large percent of the $18 million stated in the deficit. And looking through the budget, we couldn't find where the additional about $16 to $15 million deficit is demonstrated within the budget. So we would like to see kind of where that's documented and what areas it's in. Looking at FTEs on the information given to the state, on the current adopted budget, FTEs increased from 688 to 734 from M&O. And on the current adopted budget, FTEs increased from 23 to 252 from a fund that is likely from ESSER. One, was that fund ESSER? Two, what are these new 225 positions that work directly with children that are full-time? Or is this an error? And three, if positions were moved over from M&O to fund this, possibly from ESSER, why did the FTEs on the first page of the budget not come down, not decrease commensurately? Looking at the budget balance carry forward on last year's AFR, there's $6.2 million for an ending balance. But on page 7 of the current adopted budget, the budget carry forward was $0. While this isn't necessarily bad practice, it's not super transparent. So one, where is the money accounted for, basically? Two, looking at how we can leverage our funds to benefit the district in this difficult time. Looking at last year's AFR, there's $13.5 million balance in indirect costs that should be carried over and can be used for a one-time expenditure. There's $8.4 million in indirect costs budgeted for this year, looking at the current budget. But the AFR from last year said we only spent over $100,000 from indirect costs. And then looking at what percent of unrestricted indirect cost rate is used for food service, because up to 25% can be moved into indirect costs and used for a one-time expenditure. With food service balance of last year being $5.5 million, the fund would remain healthy while the higher indirect rate is used. This could generate another $2 million depending on the rate that we're currently using. And then looking at the DAA fund, which is the district additional assistance, there's $6.4 million in DAA, half of which can be moved to M&O. And while it's capital, it's not related to the bond promise changes that with the voters and can be used for a one-time expenditure and move back to M&O the following year. $2.7 million was used out of this fund last year, so moving half of it to M&O wouldn't even significantly alter the typical use that was demonstrated last year. And then the last part, looking at ESSER. One, it was said that ESSER funds are very closely monitored because we have to demonstrate to the government what we're using them for. So what projects are these funds earmarked for? If 13 million in the indirect funds, 3 million from DAA and 2 million from indirect costs taken from food services don't make up the difference, why can't we use ESSER funds not being used to cover ESSER funds to cover the difference? 25% of the $74 million in ESSER 3 received could be moved into an indirect cost fund for a one-time use, which would be about between 15 and 18 million, kind of depending. And looking at the ESSER funds, I know that we were all very appreciative of the retention bonus that we all received and the incentive for vaccination. But looking at our neighbors, Glendale Elementary, directly to the north of us, used their ESSER funds to give staff a retention stipend equal to 8% of their base salary. Fowler, directly to the south of us, used their ESSER funds to give staff a retention stipend equal to 10% of their base salary and look to give a similar 5 to 10% of their base salary stipend again this year. Meanwhile, in Cartwright, we lost the good health insurance. Longevity was put on the table, which we are very pleased that is not on the table right now. Paying out sick leave at the full rate is on the table. Subbing for insurance is on the table, and money proposals from CEA were tabled due to insufficient funds. But when we look at the overall budget, we just have a lot of questions, and we don't have a lot of documented answers. So I'm a psychologist. I'm trained to follow the data. I'm trained to make database decisions. Dr. McNeil is very clear that he wants clean data sent to the state. So hopefully, we can really look at demonstrating where this is, where we need the cuts. And I understand that in the long run, we might need to make some cuts, but doing it right now seems like it might be rushed or not necessarily, or we're doing it because we have ESSER funds, or is the 18 million because we have a projected attendance trend down to 10,000 eventually? We just need clarity in exactly what the 18 million is. And that's the 18 million aside from the expenditure cap. It's not counting the 301 and 208 situation that needs to be sorted out by the legislature. It's the Cartwright specific 18 million that Ms. Farrar has spoken to. So if she could give answers on that and kind of give clarity, we would super appreciate it.
Okay, so thank you for your commentary, Ms. Green. I would say a few things about that. First of all, and Gary, if you want to weigh in, feel free. First of all, I do think that one of the things that it's probably difficult for all of us to understand is there are a lot of different pots of money when it comes to education. We know that if we're in education. But I think what we also need to know is sometimes we are robbing from Peter to pay Paul, and it's not a good strategy. What we have to look at is things that are sustainable. And if you have ever taken, for example, a school finance course, one of the things they tell you is the worst way you can spend money is to be overstaffed. And we have been overstaffed. And unfortunately, part of that is due to the fact that we have experienced declining enrollment. We have lost students to charter schools. We have lost students because families have moved out of our areas. And we have lost students because of the pandemic. On top of that, in addition to charter schools, we're also seeing these I think they called them pod schools spring up, where all you have to do is say, hey, I'm going to teach the kids on my block, and now I have a school. So that's also impacting us. It does come back, I think, to the funding formula that we are at the mercy of and that we are not funded appropriately. And I think it's well and good to compare the things people did with their ESSER with different districts, but I think we also need to look at our salary schedule. I think we need to look at our benefits. I think we need to look at the things we offer. If other school districts are engaging in that, they're probably doing it in an effort to compete with us salary-wise, because even with everything we're facing right now, Cartwright maintains extremely competitive when it comes to our salaries, and I think we do need to remember that and bear that in mind. I appreciate the reminder regarding Michela, the email with questions. I will tell you, nobody I work with has been having a week or 2 weeks or a month of leisure, least of all our CFO, Ms. Farrar. It's pretty much been nonstop. And so I will ensure that somebody is able to respond to the questions that Alex sent on Saturday. And Gary, did you want to add anything? You're on.
Okay, so I can answer some of your questions right now, okay? So let's start with the $6.2 million that was carried over. Why was it not budgeted? If you remember in our conversation on Tuesday when we had, it was Tuesday, right, when we had our Zoom meeting, and we talked about, So in essence, in M&O, there was zero carryover. It is overspent. The reason, as I explained, how I created the carryover to get that to $6.2 million was to move a portion of salary expenses from M&O to ESSER. The reason why I did that is because we are considered high risk on the auditor, we're considered high risk with regards to the Auditor General. If you look on the Auditor General's website, and I was working on trying to put something together to bring for you guys tonight, but I ran out of time. But on the Auditor General's website, there's a section right in the middle that's labeled School District Risk Analysis. And I don't have, if somebody has a computer, you can look it up, and I'll kind of guide you there. You know, give me your computer for just a second. I'll show you where it's at. Let me hold on.
We've reached the extra credit economic part of the meeting.
And you know what? While Gary and Michela are navigating that, I would just like to say that during our caucus, the board team came up with 2 times that we would be available to meet during the first week back from winter break. We could either meet that first Wednesday back from 8 until 12. That's a 4-hour block. Or that would be our first choice, Wednesday 8 to 12. Our second choice would be Tuesday 12 to 4. So I just want to throw that out there to you guys. And if people need coverage, I have spoken with Dr. Lawler, and we would be able to arrange coverage for people. I'll repeat that too. We said our first choice was Wednesday 8 to 12, and our second choice was Tuesday 12 to 4.
Immediately following when we come back from break, right? That first week?
Correct, that week. So it would be, let's see, is Tuesday the 4th? Tuesday's the 4th and Wednesday's the 5th. So our first choice is actually the 5th.
Okay, we'll consider that. I don't know, if I'm being honest, if that might be feasible. It is the first week back from break, and a lot of our teachers, well, we have, 3 on-site table members, and they're going to most likely be needed at their site that first week back. Hannah's a second-year teacher. She's most likely going to be needed to ensure that her kids had a good break. They come back, and they're still on point and focused on what they need to do. Same with Michela. We'll consider these dates and times, and we'll get back to you, but I just want to let you know that on the first week back from break, it might not be as feasible as you'd like it to be.
And we understand that, but we're just keeping in mind that our last scheduled meeting is January 12th, and that's the following week.
And I mean, we have conversed, and we are well aware that meet and confer ends when our members decide to ratify the end process. It might not even be, we might not have ratified by that time that board meeting in January comes through. So if I'm being honest, an extension of meet and confer might be likely.
And what I would say, I understand what you're saying, Alex. What I would say is my understanding is the board is going to be making some decisions and some recommendations, and so I just want you to be aware of that.
I always have that in the back of my head, and I'm just being honest. These are all things we've talked about and we've thought over, and if our team is more than willing to continue this process if we need to past that January governing board meeting.
Understood. Again, I just want to reiterate that they need to make some decisions probably sooner rather than later. Okay, were you guys able to find that, Gary and Michela? Okay.
Yes.
And so, Gary, do you want to continue?
Yes, ma'am. So again, as I was trying to show Michela, and she can show you guys on the website, the district is considered to be high risk on the Auditor General's, according to the Auditor General. We're not highest risk, but we're still high risk. So what I was trying to do is create some sort of budget balance carry forward, because that's one of the factors that is making us considered to be high risk. They look at from our budget from 17, what we've had in reserve each year, to where we were in 19, to our significant drop in 19 and 20. So what I was trying to do is create some reserve in 21 to carry us forward to try to help minimize some of that high risk concern. But you had to do that physically because there was no carryover available in M&O. You asked about why didn't I move the FTEs? Because I didn't move the entire individual, the entire FTE. I moved just a portion of the salary to be able to create that, to reduce the overage and create some carry forward.
So just to clarify, there really were 252 people partially funded from that account. So it went from 23 to 252.
I don't have the exact FTE data on my, off my head.
Okay.
Off the top of my head. I can talk more to the budget piece of it, not necessarily FTE piece of it. Okay. And the 6.2, the reason why I did not include that in our initial proposed or adopted budget is because I knew we had declining enrollment already. And so my hope is that depending on what happens with the rest of the year, unless we had to do a mandatory budget revision, I was going to do our mandatory revision in May. And then that way, depending on what enrollment we may have lost that year, that 6.2 would help offset some or minimize some of that cut. Does that make sense? That's why I didn't include it. It was strategic. It wasn't an oversight. I did it on purpose. Okay. Because if I give you a bigger budget now, and we spend it, and then the enrollment continues to decline, we're still going to have to make that cut. So I was trying to help minimize some of that. That's a normal process that I have always followed. The percentage for food service for the unrestricted rate, it is up to the 25%. Exactly how much of that was moved over into Fund 570, I don't know that off the top of my head. I know we have a 3-page spreadsheet of projects that are improvements that are being done around the district. And within that, it's allocated or delegated out. This project could come from ESSER. This project could come from bond. This project could come from capital.
And then is that something that can be shared with us?
I don't own it, but I'm sure it can show you the spreadsheet. Yeah.
Yeah, we'd just like to see, because they say that ESSER's earmarked, that's pretty broad. We'd like to see like what projects were prioritized to be used through ESSER.
Right. And again, this is not specifically ESSER specific. These are like the improvements that the district is doing. And so ESSER is helping with some of those. Bond is helping with some of those. To give you I don't have a complete list of all of the ESSER plans. That's
And Gary, am I incorrect when I say in 2024 it goes away? That's
it does.
it? Okay.
Yeah. If we can make it that long.
Right.
I had thought that Victoria said that she could give us that because it was very clearly laid out because we had to give it to the government.
It is in our grant proposal. So Victoria has it. I'm just referencing a spreadsheet that I have.
Gotcha.
Or that it's been shared with me that I can kind of explain, because you're asking me what are some of these different projects, not the complete list.
And so while Gary and Michela were looking for the information on the computer, I just want to reiterate what I shared with the rest of the group. We had offered a couple of blocks of time that first week back at school that we were all able to meet, and one of those was Wednesday from 8 to 12, which again we know is difficult. The other's Tuesday from 12 to 4. And we could get coverage, but we also know it's the first week back. So just think about that, and if you guys could let us know, that would be much appreciated. Any other discussion?
Yeah, any reason why we need to have everything done by that January board meeting? Is there not a reason why we can't wait till February or March for those decisions to be made?
My understanding, as I shared before, is that the governing board is going to be making some decisions, and I just want to make sure that everybody can have their voice heard before that happens.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, so a couple of other things I needed to share with you. One of those was just, we had talked maybe a couple of meetings ago about return to work retirees and, how we handle return to work retirees as we, move ahead. And one of the things I discovered is there are several state statutes dealing with that situation, so it's important to note a retired teacher who has returned to work is not entitled to the rights of certified teachers under ARS 15536, 15538, 15538.01, 15539 through 15543. I share that with you not to tell you that I'm interested in getting rid of our return to work retirees. I just want you guys to be aware because we had discussed it. I did some looking into it, and that's what I discovered. So I just want people to be aware of that. The other thing that I just wanted to share, and I think you have a copy of this, is a page from the handbook. Because again, in a review of the information that's in the handbook, I think everybody has a copy of page 4, and it's got H through O from the handbook. And what we discovered is N is not enforceable. So that's something moving forward we might want to look at. We might want to look at that language and what we need to do with it. It's not, I don't feel like it's anything pressing, but it was just something I discovered. That would fall under the heading of an unenforceable contract because no one can tell the school district how to spend taxpayer money. And so I just want you to be aware of that. You can talk to, the people that you work with as well, but it's just something that we need to consider. Again, I haven't written any kind of proposal or anything because I just discovered it, so I wanted you to be aware of that. Any other questions or comments? So what I'm going to do is, referring back to Michela's point about the email that was sent with questions, I'm going to make sure that you guys can get some responses to those questions by Friday. Hopefully, even though I can't force other people to do my bidding, but I will endeavor to do so. And if you guys could get back to us on the 2 days and 4-hour windows we asked about, or if you have another suggestion, please feel free to share that and just make sure that it's kind of emailed to everybody so we all can check schedules and weigh in on that. So any other discussion, questions, or comments?
Yeah, after reading this, how everything is enforced full force during the instructional year that it's been adopted, I don't see why we need to move forward with the sick leave payout this year if it's supposed to be enforced for the entire school year. So maybe we can change this to a payout that we can do at a later time, maybe after the fiscal year is ended, for the 22-23 handbook.
I would ask, if possible, and I don't care if it's done really formally or informally, but I would ask that you guys give us a counter proposal on that. Okay. Okay. Other questions or comments? Gary?
A couple of questions. So is about the sick leave payout, is there a concern that, or can you help me understand why the concern is if the sick leave payout is done this year versus next year or whenever? What does that matter?
I don't think anyone is looking forward to paying out their sick pay or their banked sick hours at a rate that they weren't promised. Everyone was promised 100% payout for their sick time, and now here we are in a budget crisis, and we are pretty much lowballing everyone with their sick hours. Personally, I wouldn't be happy if in 5 years my 800 hours of reserved sick pay, I only get 25% of that paid out to me. after all the hard work and dedication I've committed to the district. A lot of our members have contacted us, scared, upset, stressed that that district is now not, honoring their commitment of paying out all their sick pay. And so if we can maybe find a better way of moving around this, even pushing it out another year, that'd be beneficial to, to the entire district, not just to us here at the table, but to everyone.
We are going to counter, as said, but usually our negotiations are for the next year, everything in full effect for that next year. So I think that's like the biggest thing that, as emails started to pour in, is this is affecting something this contract year, which should have been negotiated for last year. And then also, of course, the budgeting and the counting on of money was one of the big things that came through.
And so, and a couple of things I would comment on that. First of all, I don't think anyone's trying to lowball anybody. I do think there is a tiered system depending upon your years of service, and so I think that was in the interest of being fair. Also, and I know we've mentioned this before, one of the things that we're discovering is problematic is when boards promise things to employees that future boards have to deal with, and there's a problem with that. And every single year, benefits, pay, all of those things need to come before the governing board for approval. And it's just going to be a process that we make sure is occurring moving forward, because we have things that occur years and years and years ago that a current board that wasn't in a position at that time as a board member is looking at that they have to endorse. And the unfortunate reality, again, is as a result of the declining enrollment, as a result of the pandemic, as a result of the funding, as a result of low birth rates, people moving, all of these things are impacting not just us right now, but a lot of districts.
I agree with that. I mean, not all the boards, know what they're getting into. Things have been negotiated in the past, and now the future boards have to deal with it. But I feel like it should still be the current board's obligation to honor those commitments at least until that fiscal year has been completed. Because that's why we're here. We are negotiating for the following year, not for the current year. That was already, what's in our handbook now is done, and it's been sent to everyone.
So again, I'm glad that you guys are going to be submitting a counter proposal, and we do look forward to seeing that.
I was just asking because I was just trying to get a better understanding as to specifically, if it's going to be paid out, and it's optional, you don't have to elect to have it done, but if it's going to be paid out, what is the concern whether it's paid in May versus if it's paid in next year? But so that helps understand a little bit.
So also, if it applies to next year, everyone that elects to leave this year would be paid the 100% exit rate regardless of their years of service, because they're under the previous handbook, which has the guideline laid out at 100. So this fiscal year would be operating under the previous handbook, and people that elect to leave would have that payout. And then moving forward, whatever we negotiate to come up with finally would be enacted.
Oh, okay, that helps. Thank you.
Okay, other questions, comments, discussion? Okay, so again, just a couple of reminders. If we could get back to everybody about a chunk of time to work together that first week back. As I already stated, will reach out to get your questions that you submitted on Saturday answered before Friday or by Friday. And in the meantime, I appreciate everyone's time and attention this evening. I know we've gone a little bit beyond, but not too terribly bad. So I am going to recommend that we adjourn, and I'm going to make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay, so it is 6:26. Dr. McNeil? Dr. Heredia? Ms. Nash? Aye. Mr. Holland? He said aye. Ms. Green?
Aye.
Ms. Stevens? Aye. Ms. Adams? Aye. Ms. Barrera? Mr. Cazares?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so that motion passes, and we are adjourned at 6:26 PM. Thank you.